I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order, 7 o'clock. Let's sleep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we get our roll call, please?
Hold on just one moment. I'm sorry. Sarah Mitchell. Alrighty. Counselor Williams.
Here.
Counselor Norton.
Sorry, I can't hear very well. Is that me?
Yes, we're taking roll call.
Okay, yes.
Counselor Pearson.
Here.
Counselor Beagle.
Present.
Counselor Junior Drago.
Here.
Mayor Kiefer is absent. Council President Prophet.
Here.
Okay.
All right, so let's start with some introductions. Should we do the people in the audience here and then go to the people on the screen? Okay. Kelly Doherty. Okay. And then on the screen, should we start with Chris Creed?
Yes, this is Chris Crane. I'm the city's legal counsel tonight.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, this is Jonathan Tallman.
Jeff? We'll skip Jeff and go to Tommy.
Good evening. My name is Tommy Brooks. I'm here representing Umatilla Electric Cooperative.
Okay, welcome. Ed? We'll come back to Ed. Joe?
Yes, I'm here.
I do. Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Middlesdorf.
Sarah?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Mitchell, an attorney with the Killington Law Group, and we represent First John 217 LLC and Jonathan Tallman.
And Rod?
Rod Taylor here.
Well, welcome, everyone. I think we've caught everybody but Ed and Jeff. Are you there, either of you? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and go on. I think it's Ed Quinn, right? Yes. And who's the Jeff? No idea? Okay.
It's either Jeff Wendell or Jackie on Jeff's computer.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I think we'll go right into formal proceedings at this time. This is a public hearing on zoning permit ZP 21-031 LU 21-005 is now called to order. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to review and correct the legal description of the property for this permit, ZP 21-031, which is UEC's request to confirm that its proposed transmission line is a permitted use on the zone. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff report, public testimony in the following order. The applicant, any testimony in support of the application, testimony opposing the application, any neutral testimony, the applicant's rebuttal, if any. Then we will close the public testimony, and after the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony will be heard from anyone unless the city council has Okay, question. The city council may ask questions of staff, after which the city council will discuss the matter and make a decision. The city council may make a final decision tonight, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain in the future. If the matter is continued, this will be the only notice of that time and date you will receive. If you wish to speak, please fill out a testimony form. It turns out we don't have that, so. Let the city recorder know. I will recognize those people wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record when you come to the podium, as the hearing will be taped. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. Again, we are only hearing testimony on a proper legal description of the property. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. In its earlier decision, the city council determined that the application complies with these criteria, and we do not intend to revisit that conclusion. However, we subsequently realized that the legal description of the property in that decision was inconsistent and in some places incorrect. Accordingly, the purpose of tonight's hearing is to take testimony on that issue and make a new decision. If you testify, your comment should address the property's legal description. Testimony on other issues will be rejected and not considered by the city council. Failure to raise an issue in sufficient detail to allow the city council and the parties the ability to respond to the issue prohibits an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Similarly, failure to raise constitutional or other issues regarding any condition of approval in sufficient detail to allow the city council to respond to the issue prohibits a lawsuit in circuit court on that basis. Now, I ask the members of the city council to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. Hearing none, does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the city councilor's impartiality?
I would like to ask if the city councilors actually signed that lease with the UEC on tax lot 400, that puts you guys in a pretty precarious situation where you said that you will not do anything to stop any proceedings. I would like to know from each of you if you had any knowledge of the signing of that form. I have forms if you'd like to see them.
Chair, I believe the question was directed at whether or not there's a challenge on the basis of bias, ex parte contact, or conflict of interest. I believe that any questions about other matters can be addressed during the testimony.
This is about ex parte or not ex parte contact, but this is about conflict of interest.
Okay, well, again, that can be addressed during the testimony. Do any of the counselors have any ex parte contacts they believe need to be disclosed? Okay.
Here's none. So the next step would be the staff report. Very clever.
Okay. File ZP 21-031. Applicant, Umatilla Electric Cooperation Project, Olson Road 230 kV transmission line. File LU 21 of ZP 21-31 findings. The applicant is Umatilla Electric Co-op. Application date. The application in file ZP 2131 was submitted on May 26, 2021. Completeness, the application was deemed complete May 28, 21. Subject properties includes tax lots 3,000, 3201, 3206, and 3300 of map 4N 2510. You want to put that map up?
Is everyone able to hear Barry? Can we get a check on that? I just feel like you're a little low, Barry.
Okay. Okay, the tax lots on 4 North 2511 are the two furthest ones to the right. 3206 and 3201 are the ones in the middle. The two to the left are the Tallman's properties, which are not part of this because that was pulled. And that is a separate hearing that will happen February 24th. And 3300 is right up at the top. It's a narrow strip of land that the transmission line runs on. Zoning is commercial service center sub-district. Proposed use, the application proposes to install 2 segments of the 230 kV electrical transmission line. Applicable criteria, Boardman Development Code 2.2, 3.4, and 4.1. Findings, this matter came before the Boardman City Council as an appeal from a type 3 planning commission decision on file ZP 21-31. In that decision, planning commission denied the appeals upholding the staff type 2 decision, which approved Umatilla Electric's application to develop a 230 kV electric line, transmission line. That will be constructed in part on multiple parcels within the city of Boardman. As described in the application, the proposed project is needed to reliably accommodate electrical growth in the Boardman area. The line will be rated at 230 kV and integrated into UEC's area grid. Further described in the application, UEC's electrical load in Boardman area has grown from 62 megawatts in 2009 to 2,060 megawatts in 2019, with forecasted growth to be about 535 megawatts by the end of 2029. This growth is driving the need for additional transmission facilities. UEC obtained a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the transmission line from the Oregon Public Utility Commission. 3, the transmission line is proposed to eventually cross 7 lots in the city. The applicant previously,
That's just not.
but it's only 7. The applicant originally requested. The applicant previously obtained a zoning permit for 2 of those tax lots. The applicant originally requested permit of 5 tax lots. The applicant later withdrew its request for 2 of those tax lots, 3205 and 3302 of map 44 North 2510, and the application was processed for the remaining 5 tax lots. The subject property is located in the commercial district service center sub-district. As such, it is subject to the standards of BDC 2.2.200. Table 2.200B lists private utilities as a permitted use in the zone. On July 26th, the city's community development director issued a notice of decision approving the zoning permit. On August 10th, 2021, First John 217 LLC and Jonathan Tallman appellants appealed the decision to the Planning Commission. On September 8th, the Planning Commission held a de novo hearing to consider the appeal. The Planning Commission left the written record open until September 15th for all the participants, open record period, until September 22nd to receive evidence and argument only for the rebuttal purposes in response to evidence submitted during the open record period. And 3, until September 29th for the applicant to provide final legal argument. Planning Commission received no testimony or evidence objecting to the hearing process or the manner in which the record was left open. Each of the subject tax lots are commercially zoned and in the service center zone, the sub-district of the commercial district. The proposed electrical transmission line is an outright permitted use in the SC zone. BDC 2.2.200B states that the land uses listed in 2.2.200B are permitted in the service center subdistrict, subject to the provisions of this chapter. Chapter 2.2.2B 2B lists the following and as an outright permitted use: private utilities, natural gas, electricity, telephone, cable, and outright permitted use. Private utilities, example given, natural gas, electricity, telephone, cable, and other outright permitted uses, private utilities. Where a use is listed in table 2.2.200B is subject to any additional standards beyond those in the BDC 2.2.200. The table notes which additional standards apply for private utilities. No additional standards are listed. The Planning Commission finds that the UEC is a private utility that provides electrical service. The record demonstrates UEC is a private cooperative organized under ORS Chapter 62 and is registered as such with the Oregon Secretary of State. The Planning Commission received testimony that UEC is not a private utility for the purposes of BCD 2.2.200, either because it is public utility is defined by ORS 757-005, because it is not the type of private utility contemplated by the code. The Planning Commission finds that the type of private that the statutory definition of public utility in 757-005 does not include cooperatives like UEC because they are expressly excluded from the definition under ORS 757.006. The Planning Commission also finds that the code does not distinguish between types of private utilities and that all private utilities, natural gas, electricity, telephone, cable, and similar facilities are allowed by right in the service center zone. Based on the figures and other information in the record provided by the applicant, the transmission line satisfies applicable development standards for an electric utility in the ESC zone. Under BDC, a land use that is listed in table 2.2.200B, including public utility facilities, are subject to the standards of chapter 2.2. Further, BDC 2.2.200A states that the facilities are subject to the standards in chapter 2.2. Further, BDC 2.2.200A states the base standards for the commercial district apply, except as modified by the standards of this sub-district. The Planning Commission finds that most of the standards in BDC chapter 2.2 and the base standards of the commercial district by their terms do not apply to the proposed transmission lines. To the extent the standards apply, the standards are met as described below. Appellants argue that the standards in BDC 2.2.150 sub B sub 1, design of buildings and developments are not satisfied. However, BDC 2.2.15A lists the types of developments which BDC 2.2.150B1 applies. Those developments include only commercial buildings, public institutional buildings, mixed-use buildings. No portion of the transmission line in the city includes a commercial or public or institutional building. Although the code does not define building, BDC 2.2.150B describes a building as measured by enclosed floor area. The only structures that are part of the transmission line are the utility poles, and they do not include any enclosed floor area. They are not considered a building for the purposes of 2.2.150. Therefore, BDC 2.150B1 does not apply. Applicants identified B 2.2.14A maximum height as not being satisfied. The code provision regulates building height. And as noted in the previous finding, no portion of the transmission line in the city includes a building, although the code does not define building. BDC 2.2.140 states the building height is measured as the vertical distance above a reference datum measured to the highest point of the coping of a flat roof or to the deck line of a mansard roof, or the average height of the highest gable of a pitched or hip roof. Utility line poles do not contain a flat roof, mansard roof, or hip roof. There is therefore no building height that can be measured. The Planning Commission further finds that none of the development standards in BTC 2.2.120 building setbacks and 2.2.130 lot coverage or 2.2.160 pedestrian amenities apply to the development of the electrical transmission line by their terms. BDC Chapter 3.4 contains additional development standards, some of which apply to utilities based on figures and other information in the record provided by the applicant. The Planning Commission finds that the development standards in BDC Chapter 3.4 either do not apply by their terms to an electrical transmission line, or where they do, they are met. Only the specific development standards in dispute in this proceeding are addressed further below. Appellants identified BDC 3.4.100A development standards as not being satisfied. BDC 3.4.100 imposes certain transportation standards. The only standard in BDC 3.4.100 that potentially applies to the proposed transmission line is the requirement that all development must have frontage or improved access to a public street. Here, the proposed development is a linear electrical utility line that does not involve transportation component. However, the Planning Commission finds that the proposed development has approved access to the street. The applicant submitted easement documents demonstrating its right to access each easement area from the underlying parcel, each of which has access to a street. Therefore, the transmission line will result in a continuous corridor that can be accessed from multiple streets. According to BDC 3.4.100, sub A is satisfied. The applicants raised certain procedural issues with respect to staff's initial approval of zoning permits, for the example of the adequacy of notice of the decision and the review of the application during site design review standards in BDC Chapter 4.2. The applicant submitted materials showing the extent of the development on each tax lot. The Planning Commission also held a novel public hearing with an extended public record period, allowing participants to review and comment on the proposal. Without determining whether the site design review is even required in this instance, the Planning Commission finds that the criteria for site design review have been satisfied. The materials submitted by the applicant were sufficient to conduct site design review, and the applicable criteria BDC 4.2.600 are satisfied because, as explained, beyond those in BDC Chapter 2.2.200, the table notes which additional standards apply for the private utilities. No additional standards are listed. The Planning Commission finds that UEC is a private utility that provides electrical service. The record demonstrates UEC is a private cooperative organized under ORS Chapter 62 and was registered as such with the Oregon Secretary of State. The Planning Commission, either because it is a received testimony that UEC is not a private utility for purposes of BEC 2.2.200. Either because it is a public utility as defined by Press 757. The applicants presented several arguments to the planning commission relating to the approval of a road as part of the zoning permit. UEC's application does not propose a road, and the zoning permit determines only whether the transmission line is allowed. Therefore, these arguments have no bearing on the planning commission's decisions. Applicant appellants have made several arguments based on the assertion that because UEC will need to obtain a zoning permit on two tax lot parcels owned by the appellants to complete the transmission line, that the transmission line is not a line at all because it is not capable of transmitting electricity until the entire line is constructed. The planning commission rejects this argument. There simply is no code provision that requires all permits for proposed linear facility be obtained at the same time. Instead, the zoning permit is used to determine whether proposed use is allowed and under what conditions on the subject property. As proposed, UEC would construct this transmission line on the tax lots that are subject to this application, each of which allow private utilities as a permitted use. Further, there is evidence in the record that UEC is in the process of acquiring the remaining two parcels for the proposed use, and the code does not prohibit UEC from seeking zoning permit for the parcels to which it has already acquired a right while it continues its efforts to acquire rights to the remaining parcels. Finally, appellants assert that the transmission line as proposed is not allowed because it is not underground. Appellant's argument is not based on the Boardman Development Code. Instead, it is based on Boardman Municipal Code, Chapter 13.12, which is referred to as the Underground Wiring Control District. The Planning Commission finds that BMC 1312 is not part of the city's land use regulations and therefore do not provide approval criteria for this land use application. Moreover, even if BMC 1312 applies to this application, the Planning Commission finds that the Underground Wiring Control District governs only those wires that are in the public rights of way. BMC 13.12.030, the provision that prohibits overhead wires, expressly states it is unlawful for any person to erect, construct, or maintain on or over the surface of any streets in the Underground Wiring Control District or through or by means of which electric current is transmitted. Because this language regulates only utility lines and streets, it does not apply to private properties away from the streets. In contrast, the BDC does contain a provision regulating utilities on private property and requires some utilities to be underground, but those provisions apply only to subdivisions that are not applicable here. 24. Finally, even if the Underground Wiring Control District is relevant to the application, there is an express exemption that allows UEC's transmission line to be constructed above ground. Specifically, BMC 13.12.130E states that the underground requirements do not apply to feeder lines, which are defined as a line that serves the system, but not a specific customer. The record demonstrates the proposed transmission line is part of a system improvement that is designed to serve the overall system and not a specific customer. Accordingly, provisions of BMC 13.2 or 13.12 do not apply. Based on the information in the record and the findings set forth above, the appeal of the staff decision is denied, and the zoning permits for tax lot 402, 403 of tax lot map 4N 2511 and 3201, 3206, 3000 of map 4N 2510 in the SC zone are approved. On October 14, 2021, the city received an appeal application for CP 21-031 to the city council from Kelly Doherty. On October 21, 21, public notice was posted online on the property and mailed to all interested parties and the adjacent property owners exceeding the 20 days before the hearing. On October 23, 21, public notice was published in the East Oregonian newspaper exceeding the required 20 days notice requirement. 29, no other person was standing commented before the October 28th deadline. On January 10th, 2022, the city withdrew the city council decision for reconsideration on LU 21-005 to correct errors in the findings of fact. The corrections were made. On January 21, 2022, public notice was sent via email, posted on the properties, and posted on the city's website for council reconsideration of the findings of fact. On January 22, 22, public notice was published in the East Oregonian newspaper for the council consideration of findings of fact. That concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Barry. So we'll take public testimony in the following order. We'll start with the applicant, UEC.
Councilor Prophet, for the record, this is Chris Crane, the city's legal counsel. Again, before we move to testimony, I do want to point out two things in the staff report. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to correct the legal description of the property in the city's decision. So it's a little embarrassing that we still have errors in the legal description. I just want to point those out in two places so we can correct the record. The first is in the background section of the staff report, item number 4. It lists tax lot 3000. That is not correct. That should not be in there. And then in finding number 25, it lists tax lot 3000 again. That should be 3300. So to summarize, the tax lots that are the subject of this property, as shown on the map on the screen and displayed to everyone here tonight, are tax lots 3201, 3206, 3300, 402, and 403. Those are the again, the Taylor property 402, the Yates property 403, Hobbs property 3206, the Glenn property through 3201, and then that 3300 to the east of the Tallman property. The Tallman properties are not the subject of this application. So we will make those corrections to the findings before any decision tonight is finalized. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we got that clear in the record.
Thank you.
May I speak to that, to the findings?
You can when it's your turn. I think it's the appellant or the applicant's turn.
I was just wondering, you allowed Mr. Crane to speak, but not me back to speak as well. You're correct.
So staff comments need to be addressed during testimony. Councilor Prophet.
So we'll go to the applicant. UEC.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, this is Tommy Brooks, here to represent Umatilla Electric Cooperative. My address is 1455 Southwest Broadway, Suite 1500. Zip code is 97202. First, I just kind of want to thank you guys for bearing with us on all this. It feels like a lot of process to basically do what amounts to correcting a typo, but it is important to get it right. And Barry's recap of the findings reminds me of how much work went into this for him first, then for the planning commission, and then for you guys last time we were here. So we're just, trying to get this last piece resolved so we can make sure that the decision is final and gets to the right properties. I think the best way for me to spend my time is just give you a little bit of a recap of how we got here and maybe a little bit of an explanation for why there might be discrepancies in the tax lots. And it all comes down to the fact that when UEC submitted its application, it provided information to the city that was about the entire project. And that was purposeful because, for a linear project, there can be questions about, well, where is this going? Where is it coming from? And we thought it would be useful to have information about the whole line. But what that means is that necessarily included information about other parcels for which we didn't need a zoning permit. We think we got through that okay with staff, but it was clear, that there was either some confusion. Some of the participants were maybe so confused by the number of tax lots that were applicable. But what we did was during the planning commission proceedings, we made, I think, a really strong effort to try to clear that up. And it was reflected in our comments to the planning commission initially. It was reflected in the draft findings that we provided to the planning commission. And what we said was, and this is what was very important for tonight, and it's kind of reflective of what Mr. Crane just said, is that there are only 5 properties associated with this particular application and this zoning permit. It's tax lot 3300, tax lot 3201, tax lot 3206, tax lot 402, and tax lot 403. All other information about the other tax lots are there just really for context, so that you have in front of you the full picture of what the project is. But it's only those 5 tax lots that really matter about this decision, because that's all we're asking the zoning permit for. The good news is, this wasn't totally wrong. In your final decision at the end of the year, it became final on December 3rd. It was clear in there what the purpose was. And I don't know if people have that in front of them, but it was finding number 3 in your earlier decision. I'm going to read the last 2 sentences of that. And it says, the applicant originally requested zoning permit approval for the other 7 lots. The applicant later withdrew its request for 2 of those lots, tax lot 3205 and 3302. And here's the important part. It says the application was processed for the remaining 5 tax lots, 402, 403, 3201, 3206, and 3300. So your decision actually did get that right in terms of what the application was for, what the applicant had done, and what was processed. So that finding was accurate. It doesn't need to be changed. And I think based on that, it was clear how the application was being processed. But unfortunately, there were typos in other parts of the decision. Specifically, I think it's, I would point to finding 25, which was it summarized the whole decision. And what finding 25 said was, based on all the findings above, the appeals denied, the zoning permits for tax lot 402, 403, 3201, 3206, and 3000 are approved. And that was the mistake. 3000 should have been 3200. Easy mistake, similar ownership, similar numbers, but just didn't reflect that earlier finding 3. So that's the main piece that needs to be corrected, just to make sure that it doesn't, it's not part of that other tax lot. And then, of course, as was said at the beginning of this, the description of the subject property at the beginning of the decision had a little bit of, it wasn't complete. It didn't list all those tax lots. So that would need to be corrected as well. But again, based on finding 3, it was clear what UEC's intent was for the application. And the change that should be made tonight is simply to make the description throughout the decision match what was in that finding 3, because that's the best description of what the applicant had proposed. And that's the best description of how the application was processed. I think one important thing to point out is that some of the comments in the record sort of portray that there's confusion about this, but the criteria that you addressed in the last time, they're the same. It doesn't really matter. So people have had a chance to weigh in on the criteria, whether or not this line is allowed in this zone. And if anything, some of the earlier notices were over-inclusive because they talked about other properties beyond just these. But in sum total, people had the chance to weigh in on the criteria. We debated that vigorously, and that was resolved in your last decision. And then the last point I want to make for our primary presentation is there was a letter from Ms. Mitchell in the record, basically saying, look, if you redo this, make sure you don't add those other two properties that were taken out. These are what we call the Tallman properties. And I'll just confirm that's not our intent. There was a separate application for that. That's going through the city process right now. And so we're not going to deal with those other tax lots either, because it wouldn't be appropriate to. So I appreciate that she raised that as an issue, and we can totally agree with that. So with that, I can answer questions. Otherwise, if there's no questions, I will certainly come back up for rebuttal when the time is appropriate.
All right, thank you. So next we'll hear any testimony in support of the application.
I'm sorry, did you say it was for the applicant or against the appeal?
So-
I'm sorry.
So Jonathan, it's testimony in support of the application.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Hearing none, I think we'll go to any testimony opposing the application.
Yes, this is Jonathan. I would like to speak.
Okay, we'll hear from Jonathan, and then Kelly's raised her hand to speak. So we'll start with you, Jonathan.
Okay, and I'm speaking, the process is very important. The voices definitely need to be heard. And clearly, because of all these details that were just read by Mr. Byler, there seems to be something really missing, and it is important that it get done and it get done right on that process. Also, I would like to note, because this got brought up, is according to the February 6th meeting, Tommy Brooks, the UEC representative, said all this is finalized at that meeting. He said that the hearing is just a formality that's already been approved. And if it's already been approved, then why is he going before today saying that this needs to be approved today? I mean, there's a lot of mixed signals. There's a lot of mixed messages that are being said and being done. And bottom line is the process and the procedures are not being followed. And lastly, the tax lots, were botched by UEC and then taken out. They tried to slip the Tallman tax lots into this ordeal and trying to get it to go without being approved and authorized. And then, oh, by the way, because you did an appeal, we're going to pull it from there. And that's why my lawyer is here, is to make sure it doesn't get done again, because procedures and processes are not being followed. This appeal needs to be denied, and that is why it's been denied. And I will say, I appealed this way back in August, and now it's being appealed at the last moment. And what about the monies that I spent on that appeal? And now here it's been told, oh, wait, we did it wrong. I mean, it just goes to show you how botched this process and procedures has been, and how this needs to be done correctly from the start, from the beginning, through the whole thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Kelly?
Kelly Doherty, 68812 Wilson Lane, Boardman, Oregon, citizen. I'm glad that Mr. Brooks and I finally agree that the tax lots and the legal descriptions have been misidentified. Within every staff report, every public notice, every finding of fact, and every notice of decision. But we still don't disagree on it. I got 2 notices in the mail, both dated the same date, both posted the same date. I have no idea which one I should address tonight. I don't know if anybody else got to, I certainly got to. It's very hard to write any kind of a rebuttal when I have two different notices. Nobody's has addressed that tonight, which notice we're referring to. It's not possible to prepare and submit testimony on two opposing notices that are two sections away from each other. ORS 197, 835-98B gives me the right to an opportunity to prepare and submit for the case. It also allows for a full and fair hearing, which you have denied me by restricting testimony to a legal description. This is the first hearing that we have the tax lots displayed correctly. The first one. I haven't had a chance to write anything for these tax lots. The application, when he applied for 14 tax lots. It's in the application. Barry put in 9 after that and approved 4. There's no 5. This finding of fact number 3 that is completely wrong. The application was not processed for 5 tax lots. The application was processed for 402, 403, 405, and 3201, as noted in the July 26th decision. This finding of fact number 3 is incorrect. I'd also like to present, I said that I thought perhaps that we should have a fair and full trial. Restricting this, delineates any fullness for me to speak on these tax lots. I guess I've been speaking on the wrong tax lots according to this, but I totally disagree. And I believe that I've been speaking on 402, 403, 405, and 3201, which was the decision of the July 26th decision. And all we have done is move that decision from one body to the other. And somehow we've slipped in 2 other tax lots. And we've forgotten about 405, which was part of the decision, which was not part of the application. So basically, if you are going to approve the decision or the appeal, and you're going to additionally approve 5 tax lots, you're going to end up with 6 tax lots. If you approve 33,000, the long narrow strip, you have not noticed the Woods family. And this is the kind of errors that happen because you haven't identified correctly in the application. It was a sloppy application, didn't have the tax lots on it. Go back and look at the application. It's for 14 tax lots. Some were in this Ford Industrial, some were GI, some were wherever. Never identified them. Gave you two sheets of properties. That was the application. That's what we had to deal with. This is the first time. This is the first hearing that it's been correct. How on earth are citizens supposed to do comments? How is this fair? How is due process been served? The Oregon Constitution says we have due process. The federal Constitution really says we have due process. It's simple. You have a notice, you have a hearing, and you have a fair tribunal. This has totally been inadequate, erroneous. The notice is just totally, blatantly misinterpreted. I kind of feel like we need to try this. It's been a lot of work, I think it should be denied. I'm sorry, I haven't had any time to prepare for this. 2 notices. First hearing that we've had the correct tax lots. I would like to submit, because I did say it, and I will follow through, an exhibit that the city has, and this is in reference, you told me I could talk about it, so I'm going to. This is in reference of, I think that you have a conflict of interest. You have signed an easement agreement with Umatilla Electric Co-op on tax lot 400 that the city owns. Probably done in exec session, don't know who signed it. But I'm sure you all read it and approved it. And it states, applying for conditional use and progress those applications through to completion and any modifications thereof, including defending the applications and appealing adverse decisions. And 2, applying for any other necessary governmental administration approvals and progressing them through to completion and any modifications thereof, including defending the applications and appealing adverse decisions. Grantor, which is you guys, the city, agrees not to make any objections to the above applications or oppose them in any way at any time. This is what you signed with UEC. How do I get a fair trial with this? You say you didn't have a conflict of interest? I think you do. 15 copies. You know, at basic level, we know how this works. The decision was the decision, 4 tax lots, 402, 403, 405, and 3201. All we did was move it up the chain. We didn't change it. We didn't add tax lots. We know what happened. It was a mistake, but it doesn't make it right. I get it. It's a big application, but it should have been done right so that the citizens have an opportunity to speak on it. And right now, I haven't had that opportunity. I'd like to request that opportunity. I'd also like to request that the whole entire record be submitted to the next meeting if you have one. How can you make a decision when you haven't seen the record? Faceless. You haven't seen testimony, you haven't seen anything. It should be policy for the city to follow their record through.
Okay, Kelly. So we've gone over the 3 minutes to complete. So we'll go on to the next one. Thank you for your
Perfect,
testimony.
thank you.
Is there any other testimony opposing the application?
Yes, Sarah Mitchell. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Again, for the record, I'm Sarah Mitchell, an attorney with the Killington Law Group, representing First John 217 LLC and Jonathan Tallman. And I submitted a letter earlier this afternoon that I believe has been forwarded to you, but in case you haven't had the time to take a look at it, I just want to briefly summarize my comments here. So first off, I appreciate Mr. Brooks confirming tonight that the applicant is not requesting the Tallman properties, which are tax lots 3302 and 3205, be added to this decision. And just to reiterate what's already been said tonight, UAC withdrew the Tallman's lots from its application in an email to the city on July 20th, 2021. And the city processed the application for the remaining 5 lots only. And as Mr. Brooks pointed out, that was documented in finding number 3 of your decision. And the Tallman properties are currently subject to a different application as well. So we understand that the applicant is not requesting that any additional properties be included in this decision, other than the 5 that were applied for. And Mr. Byler, Mr. Crane, and Mr. Brooks confirmed that tonight, but just as a precaution, we wanted to go on record that in the event that for whatever reason there is such an attempt, the Tallmans would object to their properties being included in this decision for all the reasons outlined in our previous submittals. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other opposing comments? Hearing none, we'll go on to neutral testimony. Is there any neutral testimony? Okay, hearing none. The applicant's rebuttal, if any.
Thank you. We'd like to say a few words again. Tommy Brooks for UEC. I'll take the easy one first, which is, I think, based on the comments of Mr. Tallman and Ms. Mitchell, we're all on the same page. That our application wasn't processed to include the Tallman properties. We haven't advocated it be included, not during the last round, not during this round. So I think you can put that issue to rest, and like I said, we're all on the same page. In terms of Ms. Doherty's comments, it's hard to know where to start. I think the summary of what I heard her say was that she hasn't had the chance to weigh in on the right tax lots, and that this is the first hearing that that's been possible. And that's just completely ignoring the record. As I said in my opening comments, we made it very clear to the Planning Commission during the last round, the tax lots that we intended for our application to apply to. We made it very clear which ones they didn't apply to. And we presented that information to the Planning Commission when Ms. Doherty was there. We presented that also as draft findings, and the Planning Commission adopted findings that had that. That same finding 3 that I referred to was part of the Planning Commission's decision. So then when this issue was appealed to you last time, that issue was at play. Everyone that participated knew what the applicant's intention was. They knew what had been processed. And if there were any substantive issues to be addressed, they needed to be addressed at that time. There was a de novo hearing at the City Council where those tax lots were all in front of you, in front of other participants. I understand the confusion that has been caused by the different listing, but what the City Council should look at is what impact that actually had, and there was no impact. If we were trying to slip in other parcels that hadn't been looked at by anybody, I would understand there would be objections to that. But where the notices have been broader, where the notices, where people have actually participated and know what our position is, where there has been a decision that was appealed from the Planning Commission to you guys, it's just, the argument cannot be made that the tax lots at issue were somehow hidden or wrong. And at the end of the day, these 5 tax lots that need to be confirmed were part of the process, and they were a part of the process as part of hearings and evidentiary hearings where people had full and fair process to weigh in on them. So I was trying to track the argument that the notices for this hearing were somehow wrong. Those list the same tax lots. So, there's been multiple times now. And again, this is not about changing the decision. This is not about readdressing substantive criteria. It's just making sure that the decision that was made is worded in the right way and tracks the same way through the whole decision. So with that, that concludes our rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we will close the public testimony. We will only take any other testimony if there are questions from the City Council. So, if the hearing is closed, we can go to deliberation.
Councilor Prophet, I apologize for continuing to interrupt. There are a couple of points I did want to clarify, just so that everybody understands what the decision is based on tonight. Specifically, Ms. Doherty asked that the entire record of this application be included in the record for this hearing. And that happens because, as a matter of law, this is just a continuation of the city's consideration of the application for zoning permit 21-031. So the entire record is already part of the record before the city council tonight, including frankly, all of the maps that have been in the record from the beginning that showed the proposed alignment and location of these of the applicant's transmission line. So there's really never been any question about the location of the project from the beginning. We just had to make sure we get the correct tax lot numbers listed. And then the other thing is, as far as notices, people have been receiving 2 notices because there's 2 hearings. There's tonight's hearing on the zoning permit 21031. And then next week, the city council will be hearing an appeal of the zoning permit application for 21-066. So 2 separate applications. The application for tonight's hearing correctly identified the subject of tonight's hearing, and the notice for next week's hearing correctly identifies the subject of that hearing. So yes, there were 2 notices for 2 different hearings. The record is cumulative, and so the entire record is before the city council tonight. And then finally, on the conflict of interest thing, I just wanted to point out in case for the council's benefit, and you probably already know this because you've had as part of your training as city councilors, conflict of interest is defined by Oregon statute, ORS 244.010, as if you will get some kind of financial benefit or harm from your decision. And there's been no allegation, and there can't be, that somehow the lease that that an agreement between the city and UEC will benefit any individual counselor. So there's no conflict of interest here. The city conducts many activities all over the city at all times, and sometimes they relate to each other and sometimes they don't. The mere fact that the city should be dealing with the UEC and in other aspects does not present a bias, conflict of interest, or ex parte communication. So unless the council has any other questions about the testimony or the record that's before you tonight, I'll just sit and wait for any questions.
Thank you. Do any of the other staff need to respond to a question or issue raised during testimony? Does the city council have any questions for the staff? Is there any discussion amongst the city council? Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the staff report and findings?
Counselor Prophet, may I ask a question, please?
Yes.
In the event that we accept the staff report and findings, is it appropriate to do so with the corrections that the city's attorney have presented?
I believe so. I believe that's very appropriate.
In that event, I would like to make a motion to accept the staff report and findings with the corrections as presented.
I believe
Seconded.
that. Pardon me?
Oh, that was me. I was just saying I second that.
I believe we need to does the motion need to be more declarative than that, or is that perfectly acceptable motion? Perfectly acceptable, all right. So let's call for a roll call vote. Unless there's additional discussion.
Okay, I'll use my voice, sorry. Counselor Williams,
Yes.
Counselor Norton,
yes,
Counselor Pearson,
Yes.
Counselor Beagle,
Approved.
Counselor Junior Drago,
Yes.
and Council President. Yes. Mayor Kiefer is absent.
Okay, so, let's see, Spanish started a little bit different. So, at this time, I would adjourn the.
Counselor Crockett, can I ask a question? Could you repeat that motion? Did you write that down?
I'm sure it was written down.
But Counselor Pearson made a motion to approve.
She makes a motion to adopt the staff report and findings with the changes made by council.
Thank you.
So then I'd like to close the public hearing.
Actually, we're going to adjourn the public hearing and we're going to the city council.
Right, I was gonna ask if we needed to take a 2-minute break or if we should go right into the city council meeting since it's supposed to start at 7:30. Anybody need a break? All right, so then I'd like to call the city council meeting to order. I think we won't need to like the second time. We should probably do a roll call again.
Counselor Williams,
Present.
Counselor Beagle,
Present.
Counselor Norton,
present,
Counselor Pearson,
Here.
Drake,
Here.
and Council President Crockett.
Here. So I think at this time we'll look at introductions of people who are in the audience. Let the record show that Kelly's waiting. And then we have Jeff on the Zoom meeting. Okay, and Tony. And Lisa Middlesworth. All right. So I think at this time we'll go to petitions. It says petitions on my agenda. Public comment. Well, that comes after petitions. Are there any petitions tonight? Okay, then let's go to public comment. Okay, hearing none, we'll go to action items. We have a resolution.
Staff.
In front of you, you have resolution 3-2022. I'm asking for approval to decrease our contingencies and increase some expenditures as we get past halfway through our fiscal budget year. Our estimate on some of these expenses, I calculate will be above what we originally budgeted. It is below the 15% maximum move. And so I listed in there what these expenses are for. Some of these that are not expenses that we have now, it's just the calculation that we will possibly be over by budget year end. So I asked for approval to move contingency and increase our expenses in the areas listed.
Any discussion?
Madam President, I do have some questions.
Okay,
I don't have the listing that you've identified. Is it in my package here?
It's listed on the resolution where I would be, like the first one, general fund, I would be increasing the
Oh,
go to your,
expenditure.
go to your tab, it says resolutions, it's a ways back.
No. It helps if I'm familiar with tax.
It's a brand new system.
Should given us to us so we could review it. No. Thank you, man.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion about the resolution? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 3-2022, a resolution to decrease contingency and to increase 2021 to 2022 expenditures for materials and services and capital projects.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Are there any other discussion or questions?
Madam President.
Yes.
Thank you. All these items that are listed, what are we talking, 250,000? That money is coming from where?
It's a line item that is budgeted as a contingency, which its purpose is that because we don't know exactly what our expenses will be. And so we're allowed to budget a contingency that says, okay, we're actually gonna have a little bit more expenses in this category than what we expected. And that contingency can be decreased so that we can increase the expenses.
And which line item was that in?
It's called contingency.
Okay. Thank you, that's all.
All right. Any other discussion?
Roll call vote.
Please.
Okay. Counselor Williams.
Approved.
Counselor Beagle.
Approved.
Counselor Norton.
Approved.
Counselor Pearson.
Yes.
Counselor Junior Drago.
Yes.
And Council President Prophet.
Yes. So the next action item is a resolution. 4-2022.
This resolution comes to us due to us receiving a general obligation bond payment from the Columbia River Enterprise Zone 2. And this we did not have budgeted. So this resolution is for us to accept that. That is their intent, and so that is where those funds will be going towards.
Is there any discussion?
Well, I think that this year is the first year we've had the geo bond on the tax roll. And so some of the companies that are in the enterprise zone had to pay taxes on that, where they would have been exempt. So this is the money that separately that they're sending in. So now if we get an opportunity, we'll spend.
So what you're saying is this is money coming into the city?
Yes.
Okay. And there's no identifier or restriction on how we spend?
No.
Thank you.
There isn't, is there?
No, this one is intended to go towards our geo bond payments.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, this is,
on the geo.
yes.
Sorry.
But I think, well, I might be wrong, but I think it could be spent anyway, but it's good fiscal practice.
No, it has to be spent on the geo bond. That's
Their
right.
intent.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Am I mistaken, or did we do something similar to this the last meeting?
Not for Geo bond.
Okay,
That's what we're bringing in now.
okay,
We just received it. The money.
okay. Can I ask how much?
Pardon me?
How much did you receive?
$315,657.20. And, yeah, because our bond payment, will change depending on what our assessed value is. So I think we're already probably under what we said that we would charge because the assessed value, every day people are building things, so it's making the assessed value better for us.
So basically speaking, this is just a transfer of funds from one organization to another organization.
Yes. Yes, and see, where we didn't budget it, we couldn't have spent it. And so now that we accept it and you, is that right? Now you know, so we'll put it into the bond issue where it's supposed to go.
Madam President, I make a motion to accept resolution 4-2022, a resolution to accept a Columbia River Enterprise Zone 2 general obligation bond payment.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I would like to ask a question, please, Council Prophet.
Of course, Leslie.
Can you confirm the first line dated February 14th? If that is correct?
That would be 15.
It should just probably say the 15th, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
I amend my amendment or motion. Let me refresh.
Okay.
Counselor Williams.
Approved.
Counselor Beagle.
Approve.
Counselor Norton.
Yes.
Counselor Pearson.
Yes.
Counselor Junior Drago.
Yes.
And Council President Prophet.
Yes. Okay, so the only things left are document signatures. I think we'll have to wait until that one's
Right.
corrected. And there's just one document to sign. And then we can adjourn unless there's anything for the good of the order.
Yes, there is.
All right.
So, Karen, did you want
We should introduce Carla.
to?
Carla's been sitting here, and so for all of the counselors, we have asked Carla to join our team part-time. She was the Morrow County planner, so she has experience, and we're getting overwhelmed with amount of work, so Carla has agreed to come part-time. So today was her first day, and so we had lots of meetings today.
It's been long.
Yes, it has been a long day, but she'll be a great team member for us. And that will lighten Barry's load up to do all the extra projects that we have coming down the road.
Wonderful to meet you.
Nice to meet you all too. I know some of you, but some of you, been a lot of changes since I've been last to a Boardman City Council meeting, so I look forward to getting to know you all.
Why don't you just give us a real quick history of
Sure.
your experience and
Sure. So real quick, I don't do anything quick, Greg.
try.
Okay, I'll try. So my experience with planning actually comes from serving on a planning commission. That's where I started in my planning career. Actually, a little before that, I testified at the planning commission. When some things were happening near my home, the then city contract planner and city manager for the city of Umatilla asked me to be on the planning commission. I did that for several years, and then I found myself with an opportunity to go work for Morrow County. I started in the planning department as the office manager, became the associate planner, and after less than 18 months there, I found myself in the role as planning director, which I then served in for just shy of 17 years. So I spent a lot of time working for Morrow County. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. In 2019, I knew it was ready. I needed a change. I needed a change of scenery and a change of stuff. I left the county and I then hung my shingle up. Started Carl McLean Consulting LLC. I've been doing that just a little over 2 years.
And I've not sidelined that, I'm gonna continue to do that. I'll have to take a little bit of a back seat because I'm doing this half time now, so. I have spent time the last 2 years learning a lot about urban planning. Working for Irrigan, Umatilla, a little bit for Boardman. It was certainly something that I didn't fully understand or appreciate, and I've grown to understand it a lot better, so. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to how, counties don't have to deal with what they call wet infrastructure. Counties don't deal with water and wastewater and pipes. We deal with roads, but certainly not the level of street improvements that cities do. So it's been a real learning experience and learning curve the last 2 years, but, and it's gonna continue, so. I know I'm gonna learn a lot from Barry in the near term, so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for letting me join the team. Well, welcome. Thank you.
So one last thing from me, as you see, we've kind of changed up the format for trying to make things a little simpler to find in the packet. When you leave, if you'll leave your book here, if you want to take any of the documents out, that's fine. If you want to leave them in, include it in your next agenda or next packet. We're hoping to have these ready for you when you get here so that we're able to easily find where we need to go in our packet. So you'll still receive your packets online or via email. So we'll still have those. This just makes it a little easier to find when you get it.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have.
So excuse me, but let's be clear, what kind of a meeting are we having on the 24th? Is it a planning committee or is it city council?
And what are we?
It's a planning commission meeting.
Okay, good.
Back through here.
Yeah, we'll do this again.
No, it's
So
With the planning commission.
Oh, but not the council.
No.
Okay. I was gonna say the 24th, it's not a good day.
That's the planning commission, they'll render a decision on hearing, so. Okay.
Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. What is it? I can't read that long. 8:25. I can't. I didn't hear your ankle for me, it's difficult to see.